Welcome to the Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Eric, and I love the Horus Heresy. So, we are at a bit of a milestone in our Horus Heresy journey. Horus Heresy third edition is about 1 year old this summer. And in addition, we have seen the release of Warhammer 40,000 11th edition as well. And at some point, I do intend on doing a video about 11th edition. I want to get more information about the edition and maybe play a game before I make a video about it. But I have feelings. I am not happy about this edition. I am not excited about it, even a little bit. The more I learn about it, the less excited I become. And in the context of sort of that profound negativity I feel towards Warhammer 40,000 11th edition, I thought it might be helpful or maybe, I don't know, refreshing to do a video about why I like Horus Heresy instead, at least instead for now. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that and go through all the reasons why I think Horus Heresy is actually a good game and a good setting and all of that. With that said, there is one little side piece I do want to discuss before we get into things, and that is the physicality of Horus Heresy. Wargaming in general has physical miniatures that we get to buy and own and play with and paint and touch and feel. There are mostly physical books that you have and real terrain layouts. And wargaming in general is an in-person interaction. You get together with another human being or multiple human beings, and you play the game and you have a conversation, and maybe you actually get to know that person. And hopefully, there is some sort of social interaction with all of that. I point this out because we are living in a world that is increasingly isolating. It's increasingly digitalized. It's increasingly subscription service based. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you don't own things. So I'm recording this in July of 2026, and Sony just announced that the PlayStation 6 won't be coming with physical copies of games anymore. It's all digital. And the problem with everything being all digital and everything being based on subscription services is that you don't own anything. And at any point, the corporations can take those things away from you. And I grew up in central Pennsylvania, where we had coal boom and bust cycles. And coal companies would come into an area, they'd exploit the resources and the labor force and make a bunch of money. And then those coal companies would disappear. And in a lot of cases, they left behind really horrible environmental devastation, things like acid mine drainage. And there are streams, in central PA that even to this day, 200 years after the fact, um, don't have life in them because they are so toxic, and the acid mine drainage is so intense that they can't support, invertebrate life and things like that. And the problem with that system or that occurrence is that there is no corporation that you can go after to sue to say, hey, fix this water or pay to fix this water, because the corporations disappeared. And I point that out in the context of sort of a digital world where you might, buy all of your games digitally or all of your rules digitally. And the understanding that if those corporations disappear, because corporations are not real, they're just legal entities, there is no recourse. There is no way to get your stuff back. And that is, I think, a dangerous path to go down. It is not the path that I want to go down. I hear a lot of people talking about how they want 40K to be an entirely digital rule set, that makes it easier and more accessible, and that it might be cheaper. It won't be cheaper. And they have all these reasons for why that's the case. And I think what people are missing is that if it is an entirely digital rule set, then you don't own those things. You will never own those things. And that to me is sort of antithetical to the hobby in general. Now, I'm not gatekeeping here. I understand that everybody is in their own has their own opinion of this. I understand that there are people in the community who need the accessibility of digital copies, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But when I sit down across the table from someone to play a game, I don't want to be staring at a phone or a tablet. I don't want to be referencing things on my phone. Even if I build my list on something like New Recruit, I will usually print that list off so that I can bring it with me to the game. That's my preference personally. You may vary. That is totally acceptable. But all of those things are sort of my sell towards wargaming in general. And if you are familiar with what's happening with Warhammer 40,000, you might understand some of my frustrations with the new edition. But let's focus on the good. Let's talk about Horus Heresy. So I have sort of four categories that I'm going to fall into with this, and we'll go through each in turn. So the first is Horus Heresy as a setting and a story. So just the Horus Heresy universe. I'm not sure how to refer to this, and if somebody has an idea about how to refer to this in generically, let me know in the comments. Because when people ask me what I play or what my hobby is, I can't really say Warhammer 40,000 anymore because I haven't really played Warhammer 40,000 and bought any kits for Warhammer 40,000 in a long time. But Warhammer 30,000 or Horus Heresy doesn't make the same, you know, it doesn't have the same impact for people. I tend to say the Warhammer universe or the Warhammer galaxy, I think is maybe a good way to put it. But yeah, if you have a suggestion, let me know. The second point is going to be Horus Heresy third edition as a game. And third edition is not perfect. We will talk about that as well. But yeah, we'll talk about that. Mechanicum as a faction. I play Mechanicum. I have some Astartes models, and while I'm excited enough to paint some of them, I'm much more excited about painting and playing Mechanicum. And the last point will be the community. So you guys, the people that I get to play with and interact with, and sort of have those interactions with on the tabletop. So let's get into these. Horus Heresy is frankly an amazing setting. I have a background in historical wargaming. When I was a teenager, a long, long time ago in the 1900s, I got into historical wargaming. That was my first dip into the hobby. And then I was exposed very shortly thereafter to Warhammer 40,000. And so that's sort of, the combination of both of those things is sort of my genesis as a player. But I still remember my first trip to Historicon in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which was, I don't know if it still is, probably still is, a massive historical convention, seeing all of the incredible boards that people made. And if you've not been to a historical convention and there's one relatively close to you, I would suggest going just for the spectacle of it. Even if you're not interested in the hobby, just the incredible work that people do to make their models look amazing. I remember people having discussions. I'm not even a Napoleonics person, but having discussions about which order to put feathers of different colors in Napoleonic models that were like 5 millimeters tall, right? Like people really get into historical wargaming, and there's a certain granularity to the details that I personally find very appealing. I enjoy that stuff. I think it's fun. I think it's neat to explore the history and to understand sort of the context and the broader political setting, things like that. I find all of that very interesting. I also, though, really like science fiction. I think that science fiction is really fun. It's a great genre. I'm not into all of it. I'm not a Star Wars person. I've tried to be. I'm just not it's just not my thing, and that's fine. I have friends who are into Star Wars, but you know, I'm much more sort of a Star Trek person, but not a Trekkie, not that much into it. And you know, Horus Heresy is my jam. It's also got this fun little caveat for Horus Heresy that it's the space opera. It's just this ridiculously over the top, grimdark sort of everything, even the Primarchs, like everything is sort of turned up to 11 in a way that is sometimes satirical, sometimes fun, sometimes frustrating, but always entertaining. And I really enjoy that, and I think that it speaks to the genre and the story that I can take my middle child who is 21 and give them Horus Rising and just be like, hey, look, just read this and let me know. And you know, within a few months, they've gone through the first 5 books and are really enjoying the setting and are really enjoying the books. That speaks to a broader appeal outside of just, you know, wargaming and nerdiness. And the fact that this is almost a historical sci-fi war game, which is sort of a description that I've heard thrown around by a number of people, is just like it's the chef's kiss for me. I really enjoy that we get this thing that's this mixture of both historical and sci-fi when we come to our game. It goes a little bit further than that, right? We have this overwhelming, really, number of books. There are 54 core books in the setting. So the Horus Heresy novels, there are 54 of those. But then there are 21 additional novels, things like Primarch novels and other stories that come alongside of that. And some of those are very, very good as well and an essential reading. There are 12 Siege of Terra novels. I am reading through Saturnine again now, and I think Saturnine might be my favorite book of the whole series, which is kind of a weird thing to say because the moment I say it, I start to think about all the other ones I really like too. But Saturnine is really good, and you know, all of these, not all of them, most of the books are really good and tell a really great story. Plus, we get this additional series of books that we're kind of falling into. We have the Dropsite Massacre book, which was good. It wasn't sort of Saturnine level of good, but it's still a good book. We got the Zardu Layak book, which I recently read, The Crimson Apostle, which is a great book and just a character that I did not expect them to develop in the way that they were developing him, but it's still a really good book, right? So we're, you know, if we're kind of keeping score, what are we at? Like over 80 books now, coming up on 100 books for this series that get into all of the nitty gritty. It tells the story of humans. It tells the story of you know, space marines. It's got all these sort of in Primarchs. We get all sorts of perspectives. We get traitors and loyalists and everybody in between. We get, you know, perspectives from Xenos. Do we get perspectives? I don't know. We get to see Xenos in the books and all of these things. But in addition to all of this, we have the old Forge World books, the Black books from first edition Horus Heresy. We have the second edition Horus Heresy books, which also have a lot of lore in them. We get tables of organization and equipment, which I am always a sucker for, kind of showing who was where and what their force disposition was. And we get additional lore that only pops up in those books. We get all of this sort of broad sweeping information that if you are a mega nerd like me, you get into, you learn, you study, you get almost an encyclopedic knowledge of these things. I'm certainly not the expert on this, but I do have people in the local community who will come and be like, hey, listen, do you know what this, you know, where this reference is or something like that? Which is always kind of fun. And I like this. I like that part of the setting. I also like the fact that it's settled. The Horse Heresy is over. We know how it ends. We know who dies. We know who lives for the most part, right? We know the units and the technology and the characters that are involved. And I compare that to something like 40K, where the narrative is still evolving. And while that's also fun and also has its sort of its advantages, I think that I prefer it when it's sort of historical view, right? When we have this backwards looking, this is done, we know how this ended, we know how this went, and now we can set our games in sort of that historical context, which is very appealing to me. It may not be for everyone, I understand that, but it is for me. In addition to all of this, kind of continuing this theme, we get these great characters, which I sort of alluded to. So we get the Primarchs as characters, and the Primarchs are very much cast, when they're done right, are cast in this sort of larger than life, literally, over the top characters who are almost like reminiscent of gods in mythology, right? They are not well adjusted humans, they are not normal on any level. All of them have their own little foibles and quirks and things that make them unique, and none of them are like, I guess maybe Jagatai Khan, although he's very isolationist. There aren't a lot of them who are sort of like mentally healthy, which is great. I mean, that's phenomenal in a character, and is actually a little terrifying in a character who is so powerful and so influential as a Primarch. Like every single one of them has some sort of like weird quirk or weird flaw that makes them a little bit more human, but also sort of less human in a way. They're just well written when they're written well. They're really well written. We get these fantastic Stardust characters that pop up. People like Saul Tarbets, who's my kid's favorite character. Camba Diaz just died in a book that I read. I won't disclose which one, but that I didn't really care about Camba Diaz up to that point, but his death was it's a really sad death, and it's really well written. We get Nathaniel Garrow, who is probably my favorite character in the whole series, who pops up and shows up in a number of books and is a major character and is a big character in Saturnine as well, which is probably one of the reasons why I enjoy it. I love seeing the perspectives from the Astartes. I love the interactions between the Astartes. If you sat down and pitched a book and said that I want to write an 80 book series and it's going to be mainly focused on these all male, genetically enhanced, psychologically indoctrinated super soldiers, I think most people would sort of view that a series as maybe being, it's going to be boring, right? There's not a whole lot of depth to those characters. You're not going to get a lot of mileage out of that. But yet somehow they do. I mean, we have characters who have incredibly strong brotherly bonds. We have characters who clearly love each other and care about each other on ways that are, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but are almost quasi romantic, right? Like it's these relationships are probably as close to love as a lot of as any space marine can get, right? Like someone like Gargil Loken and Tark Targaden, or Khan and Argel Tal, right? Like some of these relationships are, they're close. These guys love each other to the point where they will kill and die for each other in a heartbeat. Um, we get distinct and unique military orders. We get things like the Justarin and of course, I drop all the human ones out of my brain whenever I think about this. The Chiliad something. But yeah, we get all of these different distinct groups with their own characteristics, their own traditions, right? The we, the Lucifer Blacks are very different than other like human groups, and that's really cool to see. And very creative in sort of the development of the system. We get all sorts of planets. We get systems. We get campaigns within those systems and planets. So you could build your entire force. You could make your entire army based on just the Beta Garmin campaign. If you wanted to, that would be totally acceptable. You could have an entire Horus Heresy campaign that is just the Siege of Terra, and again, it would be totally acceptable. But you don't have to sort of anchor your stuff in the history of the setting. The unlike a lot of historical games where it would be really hard for you to sort of interject your own, original character and original unit and all of that stuff into like a World War II style game. In Horus Heresy, the universe is large enough, or sorry, the galaxy is large enough that you can create your own narrative. Do you want to have a group of loyalists who escaped the Istvan atrocity and have fled away from that and have become their own black shields, and they're secretly all sons of Horus and world eaters and death guard, but nobody knows because they know that they would be viewed as traitors? You can do that. You can totally do that. Would you like to build, your special unit of these are my, thousand sons that weren't at Prospero and so don't really know what happened at Prospero and are sort of kind of confused and are sometimes loyalists and are sometimes traitors? You can build that. Those things are totally acceptable within the confines of the universe, and I think that that's pretty good. I think that that's amazing. So as a setting, as a story, like um 9 out of 10, like very few notes on the setting, and mostly my notes are I would like to know more. I would like more tables of organization and equipment. I would like more campaigns. Like we get the big ones that I can think of, things like the Chandax campaign or the Beta Garmin campaign or the Siege of Terra, right? Like those are great, but I would like to see some new ones that aren't just like we're going to fight over Talarn. Give me another solar system that we can talk about, that we can have a discussion about what's happening in there. I think that's a phenomenally under utilized resource within the context of the game. Horus Heresy Third Edition is not perfect. I don't want anybody to come at me in the comments, although you can. It's comments are comments, so there's that. Don't come at me in the comments though, and say that I'm trying to like whitewash the edition. It's not perfect. There are rules that are just not good. The terrain rules, the scenario rules, right? Like I've done videos about it. We've talked about it. We have a whole video about was the edition rushed. We've talked a lot about Mechanicum within the context of the game, and the fact that I am disappointed with some of the changes that were made. I totally get that. However, if we set aside the few very apparent problem areas, the core rules are fundamentally very good. And it's really hard to make the argument that they're not good. There's a specificity there. Now, are they perfectly written, right? Like, are there things that could have been put in different places that would make the rules easier to write? Yeah, for sure. But there's a specificity and a layout to the rules that's just it's very good. It's very solid, and the game itself is pretty robust. I really appreciate the rules, like the core rules that are set up, and those are the rules for the game. Then you have special rules that are usually exceptions to the core rules, things like Armor Bane. And then you have the expanded rules like Zone Mortalis that are optional to the game. I think that that system is really elegant and a really great way to write a game. These are the core rules, and they're you have to play with them. And then you have your special rules, which are applied to the units and weapons. And then the expanded rules, which are optional but still there. And then you can tack on whatever you want. And it allows players to sort of make the game what they want the game to be, which is exactly the sort of thing that we want. I think Horus Heresy is still enjoyable. I would argue that for me personally, Horus Heresy third edition is more enjoyable than second edition. The games are smooth. I've never had a game where I sat down and I was like, this is too ambiguous to be able to play. There have been times where you're like, yeah, I'm not sure what the solution here is. Like, for example, um, I had a game where my Adamus assassin and Azek Aramon killed each other in the same challenge because the gambit for the Adamus allows them to make their attacks after um, even if after they die. And I got really lucky with my dice rolls. And so there is no sort of way to resolve that, right? Who won the combat? We just kind of I think I treated it like Aramon won because I always default to whatever is worse for me. But at the end of the day, that's not in the rules. So more or less, though, the game is pretty smooth. The game plays quickly. And I know that's not always an advantage, but I don't want to be at the table with someone for 6 hours trying to figure out a game and trying to play out the game. I can get a 3,000 point Horse Heresy game done against most opponents in 2 to 3 hours, which is sort of the sweet spot for me personally as a player. If I'm going to show up to play against somebody, I would like to play longer than the trip there, which for me, where I live currently, is usually about 40 minutes one way. But also, I don't want to be there all day playing a game, and especially if things are going badly or my opponent's not necessarily a fun person to play against. You don't want to be stuck there for hours with someone. And the game is more or less balanced. And I know that there are things that are unbalanced. We've talked a lot about multi-meltas here and armor 14 vehicles like the Land Raiders and the Spartans. There are definitely intrinsic balance issues with the game. I'm not going to make that argument that there isn't. However, faction to faction balance, and keep in mind, sorry, I should stipulate this. Balance is not necessarily good. Balance is not equal good. We've talked about that before on this channel. Sometimes imbalance is preferred in some cases. But when we're talking about just sitting down and playing the game, and both players, if they bring balanced lists, having a more or less equal chance, or at least both having a chance to win the game in that way is balanced. And I think that that is fundamentally a good thing. I think that if both players sit down and both players have the opportunity to win, that's good. And I compare that to second edition, and I've said this a few times, but it's worth mentioning here. I compare this to second edition, where in a lot of games, as an exclusively Mechanicum player, most of those games I sat down against Astartes players and I didn't expect to win. Not only did I not expect to win, I would set my own little win condition in my head, which was often I want to kill one unit. And that's a really crappy place to be for a game, is that the game balance is so out of whack that an entire faction is basically unplayable. Like they will not win in most circumstances. Now, if I had a bunch of the Forge World stuff, you could probably have made the argument that Mechanicum could win in second edition. But with the plastic stuff that was available at the time, it was very unlikely that Mechanicum players would win games. And like I said, it was very unlikely that Mechanicum players could even kill a single Space Marine unit. And that was not fun. I'm going to be honest. I enjoyed the people I was playing against. I enjoyed playing the game because I liked the context of the game, but it was not a fun experience. In third edition, it is a lot more fun. I think I have a lot better chance of performing well. And I don't need to win. I just need to feel like I have a chance. Um, yeah, and I think I do in third edition. So I think that third edition is good overall. I would really like to see us get a 1 year errata and FAQ fixing a lot of the problems. I think a lot of the problems could be fixed with an errata or FAQ. But I will say that even without that, it's still a pretty fun game to play. it's still pretty enjoyable to sit down and play games of third. Why does it feel enjoyable? I think third edition still has those feels of older editions. I liked I started playing in second edition, and my fondest memories, or some of my fondest memories, are of second edition. But that was probably just because of the nostalgia and, just having friends on a basement floor playing a game. Like it was just a different way to play. Fourth edition was really where, as an adult, I began to play the game and, in some sort of like serious adult mature version. And the stats that we have in the context of the third edition Horus Heresy and second edition, um, those are very similar to fourth edition, right? We get our core stats. We have weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness. And for me, those things are intrinsically Warhammer. The 40K and the Age of Sigmar rules that have done away with those, I think, have done away with those to the detriment of those games. I like having those stats. I like having initiative for combat. I think that that's a very good way to do it. And I think if you look at Warhammer 40,000, 8th edition, 9th edition, 10th edition, 11th edition, and the way they handle initiative in combat, you have to look at that and just be like, it would just be so much easier if you just gave things an initiative value and counted down like you do in all of the other editions. It's just, yeah, I like those core stats. I like having armor facing all my vehicles. I like using scatter dice. They're really fun. I like having templates to mark things. Like it's overall, it is a very fun way to play the game, and it has a lot of nostalgia to it. There's I'll name them because I like them as a creator. So Winters SEO actually did a video this week, and this is not in response to that. I was working on this before, in which he makes the argument like that Horus Heresy Third Edition just isn't the same and isn't fun and doesn't have that flavor and stuff, and that is his opinion, and he is certainly entitled to that. But I would argue it still does, and especially if you're someone who's playing Warhammer 40,000 11th edition, like comparing those two, like Horus Heresy Third Edition is still such a better game, fundamentally, than 10th edition was, and that probably 11th edition will be. And it's just there's so much more granularity, there's so much more detail to the game that you lose in those more recent editions of 40K. Again, it's not perfect. I'm not making the argument that it's perfect. I'm just making the argument that it's good and it's enjoyable, right? I like the challenge mechanics. In theory, I like the flyer mechanics. I don't use them. I like reactions in theory, although I do think that there are some problems with the two of the reactions. It's not all of them. It's just two of them, honestly. I like those things. I didn't think I would enjoy challenges. I love challenges. If my opponent challenges me to combat, like it's amazing. Even if I lose my model, it's still fun to do it. It's fun to set them aside and be like, yeah, we're gonna beat the crap out of each other. What are you choosing? It's enjoyable. The narrative missions for the game are very fun. I've played a lot of them now. I've played the first wave two, three times, I forget. Every time has been fun. It's an enjoyable mission. I've played the Saturnine missions. I've played the some of the relic hunt missions. They're all pretty enjoyable. I really don't have a lot of notes with the Journal Tactica missions. It's just the core missions out of the book that are terrible. And you don't have to play those. You can just play the narrative missions and ask your opponent, be like, let's do this. Especially if you're playing Mechanicum and you're really struggling with not having line. If you play the defender in those Saturnine missions, there is no line. Line does not matter. You're literally not playing for objectives, and Mechanicum plays into that really well. And so, if you're like, I'm not enjoying this game, my first suggestion to you would be to change up the missions and try playing a relic hunt mission or something like that. And even I would go one step further and before you play the game, talk to your opponent about A, what mission are we playing, and B, what sort of list are you thinking about building? And then have a conversation beforehand about what would be a fun way to play that game, right? So if you're going to play, for example, the relic hunt mission, and your opponent doesn't bring any guys with high intelligence, they're not going to have a good time, right? So, have that conversation. And it's okay to tailor your list in that context. If I was playing an opponent who was like, I am only going to bring tactical Marines. I'm not going to bring anything but tactical Marines. I, as a Mechanicum player, probably need to think pretty hard about some of the unit choices that I would bring to that game, because bringing something like a Thanatar or even a unit of Castellax, a big bulky unit of Castellax, might be problematic, because they might not have anything that can really do anything against those units. And that would not be fun for them. And, on the flip side, if you are playing Astartes and your Mechanicum player can't deal with Spartans and Terminators, it's not going to be a fun game for them if you bring only Spartans and Terminators, right? So we need to, have those conversations. And when we do have those conversations, the game becomes a lot more fun. It becomes a lot more collaborative and cooperative, and less sort of competitive in that way. And I do think that the game is what you make it. And if you bring a fun list into a fun scenario, you're going to have fun overall. You're going to have a good time. Mechanicum as a faction is great. I really have been having fun with this faction. It's, third edition, the rules, the Liber Mechanicum has its problems, for sure. No argument there. Done lots of videos about that. And there has been a loss of flavor. Like, it's not as flavorful as it used to be, right? Like, I think about my Thalax, and they lost Datagen, and they lost their ability to jump, shoot, jump. And I just feel like they are, not the same unit that they were in third edition, and that stinks, right? But on the flip side, the reason why I started playing Mechanicum was I sat down to play Horus Heresy. I made this determination. I was like, I'm going to try and get into this game. A lot of people were playing the edition and inviting me to play. Those people aren't playing anymore, unfortunately. And when I looked at the things that were there, the available factions, right, I could play Space Marines, which was an option. I was looking at the different Space Marine factions. Some are no-goes. I'm never going to play Space Wolves ever. Even if someone literally bought me an entire Space Wolves army, I would still not play Space Wolves. I didn't really want to play Word Bearers, because at that time I was playing Word Bearers in 40K, although they were sort of at the top of the list. I didn't want to play anything that was black colored armor, because I do not like painting black armor at all. So all of those were out, and that's a lot of factions. And so in lieu of feeling like there was any one Space Marine army that I was like, yes, I definitely want to paint this and play this, I started looking at the ones that weren't Space Marines. And at the time, Solar Auxilia were available in plastic, and they have great models. I love them. And if it wasn't for the fact that I would have to paint hundreds of infantry, I would do that. I didn't want to paint hundreds of infantry. But Mechanicum looks different. It is completely different than anything else. In appearance, there really isn't anything that looks like Mechanicum in Warhammer 40,000 or Horus Heresy. I guess Adeptus Mechanicus, but you get my drift. Playstyle, they're also pretty different. All of the units in Mechanicum have like exceptions to rules, right? Like in second edition and third edition to a similar extent. Your automata have set rules in the game, and then Mechanicum is all about breaking all of those rules. The play style for Mechanicum is just unlike anything else in the game. It's a very different way to play. Uh, it's very cool in that way. It's also really different than any other IP. Like, there are other IPs. I think about StarCraft, and they're I don't know what they're called in StarCraft. I'm too old to played that game very much. But they're Marine equivalent guys, right? Like they're basically just Space Marines, and there are basically just Space Marines in other games, right? We think about like Halo and stuff. Spartans are very similar to Space Marines, and so you get that overlap a lot. There is really nothing like Mechanicum in any other IP that I've seen for sci-fi. The technology, religious extremists, cybernetic, sort of to the extreme automata, like all of that stuff is very, very different than other IPs. And I really enjoy that. On top of all of that, the models are great. Even the tech thralls, putting together the tech thralls was a treat. I mean, there's a lot going on there, and they are hard to do. But I kept coming back to, man, these guys look like just basically zombies with guns, which is essentially what they are. But I loved it. I love the sort of jerky movements that are captured. I like the automata. They're really great. The Vulturax is such a great kit. Even the Myrmidons look great. They're kicking my butt for painting them, but I am working on them. We think about like Thalex and Ursarax, which are basically like nerve clusters that are bound to a cybernetic construct. Like it's just even the vehicles in Mechanicum are just different than anything else. It is very distinct to the point where when I'm playing, somebody will walk by the table and see Space Marines fighting what is that's not Space Marines. It's not anything I recognize for 40K. It's such a different thing that a lot of the time people will stop and sort of have a conversation about what are you playing? And yeah, that's fun. I like that a lot. And I think another part of this is sort of the nostalgia, right? If we get back to sort of John Blanche's work, which was fundamental for 40K, and I talked about this as well. Like John Blanche was really influential to me as a teenager. Without getting a whole lot into the Eric lore, I was raised in a really religious cult, and my dad was the leader of that cult or a leader in that cult, and I wasn't really ever exposed to art in general. That wasn't something that we really celebrated. And I definitely wasn't exposed to any of this stuff. And so seeing John Blanche's artwork, being exposed to it, right? Like there's a very distinct feel that this piece conveys, but also seeing sort of like just the craziness of the detail and all of like the mecha dendrites and all the servo skulls and just everything that's going on in this picture is just crazy. And for me, it was both formative and nostalgic to kind of look at this stuff and being able to play this faction and put together models that kind of have this feel to it is really fun. And it's worth seeing some of these things and understanding just how important his artwork was for the setting. We this like I'm not even sure what this is on the left. Some sort of Myrmidon type priest, maybe. We have a Scutari in the middle that looks a lot like the current tech priest engines here. And then the guy on the right, I mean, that hat is right off of the tech priest manipulus or the tech priest dominus. A big bulky backpack thing is very reminiscent of the manipulus, I think. Like you can the little walking staff is basically right off of the tech priest dominus. Like this piece of art on the right is pretty much informs our tech our like Magos level models. It's great, and I think that is a big appeal to me as well for this game, and I don't think that the Adeptus Mechanicus models quite capture this quite as much as the Mechanicum stuff does. The last thing that sort of draws me to this hobby, especially the Horus Heresy, is the community. You guys, for one, but also just the community in general. I think it's a little self-selecting. In general, I think Horus Heresy tends to maybe people come and dip their toes in and walk away because there are things about the game that are not not the same as 40K, right? The models in Horse Heresy are much more difficult to put together than the 40K models. And that is obviously by design for 40K or for Games Workshop. But I think that if you are used to sort of the push fit monopose um, 40K models that are so prevalent in that game, and you come over to Horus Heresy and you're, tactical marines in 17 different pieces, there are people that are going to be like, nope, not going to do this, and they leave. The rules are more detailed. We talked about that. And again, if you are from Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40,000 and you don't want that, you want to stick with your quote unquote simplified, not simple trademark rules that are definitely not simplified or simple, you may not like Horse Heresy. And I think that the size of the game is just different, right? Like the 3,000 point games, the sort of larger scale is again self-selecting. I think that people may not want to engage in that, and so we have this community that very fortuitously for us in the community sort of pushes out people who I want to call them like I don't want to use negative context like slurs or like slurs like tourists or whatnot. Um, but people that are just maybe not interested in the narrative aspect of it. And they tend not to stick around very long. I think that the community is more narrative focused, even if they are dipping harder or tipping further into the competitive side of things. I still think that there's a narrative context to the game that maybe isn't as I haven't seen in 40K as much. How's that? It's not that it doesn't exist. I haven't seen it in any of the 40K games that I've been playing in over the last 5 years. And the community has a lot of innovation and home rules that they use. A lot of people have their own terrain rules that they're using. And I know that SN Battle Reports came up with their own scenarios to use. And so there are these groups. I'm trying to remember the group. I'm so sorry. I didn't interact with them very much in second edition, but there was a group that was very much in charge of, like, not in charge of, but they had sort of a house rule system. They were the ones who were using, like, you can only use a certain number of dreadnoughts and things like that. Like, the community is not afraid of putting guardrails up and making adjustments where Games Workshop maybe doesn't or won't. And I think that that is great. I think that it's amazing. I think that that sort of self-policing is key to the game, and not only key to the game, but key to sort of cultivating the culture of gameplay that we want. It's very easy to sort of, I don't know how to say this in a way that's not going to offend some people, but sort of generically set up these match play tournament style games and events that are all about, I don't need to know my opponent. I don't need to have a conversation with my opponent beforehand. I don't need to collaborate with my opponent. The terrain is already set up for us, or is a terrain pack. The scenario is already set up for us, or is a scenario pack. We sit down, we play our game, we talk about our lists, and that's it. And for, if that is your jam, by all means, like, engage in that. But that's not where I want to come from. I want to get to know my opponent. I want to talk to them. I want to have a conversation with them about the things outside of the game, right? Like, I don't have to be friends with everyone, but I do want to cultivate relationships outside of just, oh yeah, I know them, I played against them once, right? Like, it's, and I think in general, the Horus Heresy community is much more about that than maybe other Warhammer IP communities. So in conclusion, Horus Heresy isn't perfect. I'm not going to make an argument that it is. It's not even the novels are perfect. Like, it isn't, but it is still enjoyable. It is still fun to play and fun to engage in, and I think that that's good. And just a reminder that this is a game. It is a game. We can make it what we want. I don't mind when people in the comments say, I'm not enjoying third edition. That's fine. You don't have to. I don't expect everyone to. It's a game. It's not going to appeal to everyone. Uh, However, I will say that you can make third edition what you want it to make. If you have specific arguments that you're like, I hate X, Y, or Z about third edition, and you have a local community, you can float those ideas to the local community. I don't like X, Y, or Z, then don't do those, then change those things. A good example of this is a local player is going to run a Zone Mortalis event for us. Now, the Zone Mortalis rules have changed, or will have changed by the time this event happens. So my request was is moot at this point. However, I did post and I was like, listen, I would like to come to this event. However, I just need to put this out there that as a Mechanicum player, I can't have anything less than door 2 on the table, because of the way the door rules work and the bulky rules work, which are on practically every Mechanicum unit. I mean, a door 1 means that only tech thralls can move through those doors. And I'm not going to bring tech thralls right now to Zone Mortalis. And he was very nice about it. He replied right away and was like, done. And so like that sort of conversation I think is really important for the game, and really important for making the game what you want it to be, right? If you don't like third edition because you think that, I'll pick on Land Raiders because that's the one that is annoying to me. Land Raiders and Spartans are overpowered. Then if you are going to play somebody, just maybe mention, be like, look, I don't want to limit your list, but could you try to maybe only bring 1 or 2 things that are armor 14 on all sides, right? I think that that's a reasonable request. I think that if your opponent is bringing multiples of those, you should not do that. I think that movement reacting back into transports is absolutely crap and should not be in the game, and is negative in every context and is not positive in any context. And so you could have a conversation with your opponent and be like, hey, listen, could you not do this? Or you could come up with a scenario where jumping back into your transport is going to hurt you in some way. Like maybe you won't score your objectives. So make the game what you want it to be. And have fun out there. I hope that you guys are having fun with Horus Heresy in third edition. If you have made it this far, please like and subscribe and boost and share these videos, and let's continue to grow this community. And if you are enjoying Horus Heresy, or if you like Horus Heresy, put in your comments what you like about it. What about this particular game and hobby and setting appeals to you? And if you aren't liking it, if you are one of those people that are like, yeah, I just not behind third edition, let me know why in the comments. I'm always curious to see what people's thoughts are, and those things can help me to understand how to adjust my game, my sorry, narrative league in the future. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on here. But I'm gonna call it there. Have a great day. I'll see you guys in the next video.